Hi guys, my name is Kenzie and welcome back to a watercolor tutorial, and today we're going to be painting these Inukshuks. So when I first moved to Canada a couple years ago, I would see these pretty much everywhere I go, and I thought that they were incredible. And when I found out the meaning behind them, I thought that they were even more incredible. So I felt like I just had to paint them. And these Inukshuks have now been broadly adopted by Canadians to kind of represent the Indigenous community and their heritage. So I think that's really cool. So when I think of almost like cottage country, Ontario, Canada, I really do often think of the Inukshuk. So I can't wait to paint this with you, and I hope you like a little bit of Canada. All right guys, let's go over our supplies. So I have 2 water cups right here. I have my cloth for me to tap. I also have my palette and where I mix my colors. I also have here my 12 and my 8 brush. So that's probably what I'm going to be painting with for the entirety of the painting, and let's jump into it. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do first is we are going to be applying just water to our sky area, and we do this for a couple of reasons. This is the wet on wet technique, and with watercolor, paper dries really quickly, so this just buys us a bit of time so that we don't have any streaks or lines in our sky. And with the wet on wet, it also really helps with just really soft blends as well. So because I'm doing a sunset, it's going to help the colors just kind of blend and be very pretty. So we're going to be doing a little bit of grading here with our sunset, and I'm actually not going to touch this part. Actually, you know what, why don't we just do it? I'll just touch this part with water as well. Okay, so I'm going to be mixing up my colors, and I like to pull my colors to my mixing palette versus directly applying them from my palette. And that's because sometimes it just gets too pigmented going straight from here onto my page, and I don't want this to be too dark, so I like to mix it right here. All right, so I'm going to apply my first layer. I just mixed up a bit of a lighter blue with some indigo. Just helps the blue just become a little bit more of a natural blue with the indigo. Indigo makes it, yeah, a little bit more natural. So I'm going to pull a little bit of this indigo color just at the very top here, and let the lower part be blue, and I'm going to bring it down. Okay, and I'm going to again bring a little bit of a lighter blue, so just using less of the blue paint, more of the water, and just pulling it down. When it starts to go to the Inukshuk's arms, I'm going to stop applying my blue, and I'm just going to use a wash, which is just basically water with like the smallest bit. That way, when it gets close to the sun area, it kind of shines bright, as if the sun's right there at the bottom. Okay, and I'm trying not to go over my lines. If that happens, it's not the end of the world. And I want it a little bit darker over here. And I want to just bring down this darkness just a hair, because I felt like there's just too much of a gap between the dark and the light. Okay, and then when it gets again to around this area, I'm going to slowly start switching to a yellowish color. And I'm actually going to pull some of this yellow just a little bit into the blue, so it's like more of a natural bleed, but careful not to mix too much, otherwise it's going to turn green. So you basically just want to touch it, and then I want to mix a little bit of this orange and yellow together, just a bit. And I want to add a little bit of brown to it, actually. I don't want it to be too orangey. And I'm going to spread it out trying to find the perfect blend of these colors. There we go. And I'll do like the orange part right here. Again, trying not to go over, but if I do, it's really not the end of the world. So you'll see here, right here, this yellow was just super bright. I can actually just dip my brush into the water, which I just did, and just move around that paint that I had on the page. So I'm not freaking out if that happens. I can even just pull a little bit of yellow to this part right here. And I want to bring in the yellow just a hair on this side, not much though. It's supposed to look like the sunset is just setting, so I don't want it to be too high or too bright. Okay, so I'm not going to do my clouds right now that I want in the sky. I want to wait until this dries, otherwise the colors will just start to bleed and blend, and we don't really want that. And I do want to just add a little bit more darkness, just a little bit right here. Okay, I also don't want to start on my mountain area right here, because if I do, the green's gonna bleed into my sunset. So I'm just gonna leave this part alone to dry naturally. And I'm gonna try and basically mimic what I just did down in my lake area. So what I need to do is apply water. The same thing that I just did with the sky. And I am, do you see this little line right here? I am going to actually start my sunset right on top of this line. So feel free to cover that with water as well. And I'll show you why in 1 second. So if you look at the reference photo, you'll see that I actually have my mountains reflected on my lake. In this line, the bottom one right here is supposed to represent where we're supposed to flip. So we have a little bit of lake, the line in between the lines, and then below the lines is where we're gonna mimic the reflection. Okay, so we're gonna reverse what we just did. So starting with a yellowy color, I'm going to start with my line right there. That's more of an orangey. I'll do more yellow right here. Put more yellow on this side. Oh, that's very bright. I need to use water now just to drag this out. Do a bit of yellow right here as well, since there's yellow right here. And although the majority of this is probably going to be covered, I'm still going to paint it like it's not going to be. Okay, so now that I have that, I'm going to move on to like my little orangey color as well that I had going. And I had a lot of the orangey over this side versus this side. So I'm just going to kind of repeat what I have going, kind of rotating here a little bit between the yellow and the orangey color, bringing them into each other as well, because we want them to be looking all natural and not like staggered lines. Okay, and then we're gonna move on to that light blue color that we had down. And that's basically just a wash, which is a lot of water versus blue pigment. Bringing that in even just the slightest bit. And then when you go towards the bottom, you can have it go darker. And I'm actually gonna do more lines versus trying to have it super smooth, just because it is a lake and there could be maybe some waves. So I'm using the very tip of my brush and I'm going through while it's wet, just different parts of it, and creating this line effect. That's super, super dark with the pencil. And remembering to kind of bring the darkness into it as well. Okay, let me use a lighter blue with a lot of water. And again, doing the same thing we did with the orange, we're actually going to bring in some of that blue into the orange so it looks like it's mixed. Try not to mix too much because we don't want it to look green. Okay, that's very heavily pigmented, so I'm going in with just water on my brush, moving around the paint that I just put on my page. So this orange part is already dry, so now I'm going to get rid of all of the water on my brush, tapping my napkin, and just touching the edge of the blue. I'm just going to pull it in ever so slightly into my orange, so there's like a natural blend right here. Okay, so as of right now, I'm pretty happy with how all of this looks. I'm going to let this dry, and I might do a second layer. Actually, you know what? I want there to be more, I want there to be a little bit more yellow. I just feel like it's lacking a little bit. So this is where I have to be careful because I don't want the ocean, not the ocean, sorry, the lake turning green. So what I may need to do here is add a second layer if I want my yellow to be more bright in your face, but we'll see. We'll see how where the painting goes. As of right now, I think that's good enough. All right, I'm gonna dry this. So with watercolor, we like to start light and then we build up our darker layers as we go, because if we start too dark, it's really hard for us to layer. So I'm going to start with my lightest color of green that I like, and I'm actually not going to be staying inside the lines. You'll see my ink lines right here. I'm not going to be staying inside of these. I want there to look like there's trees in the distance. So the trick for these mountains to look like it's in the distance, you want to avoid lots and lots of detail. So I don't want to focus too much on every single detail of a tree that's in the distance. I just want to give it the effect that there is. And with that, that takes a few layers as well to kind of create some depth. So I'll show you what that will be like. So I now have my first green color down. Well, almost have it down. I have to do this side. Okay, and then I'm gonna go to this line that's already down, and I'm going to mimic what I see. So it starts off pretty thick, or pretty thin, sorry, and then it gets thicker. And this is just a little, and then this is thick over here and big. And then it slowly tapers. And I wouldn't worry too much about trying to get the proportions absolutely perfect. It's just trying to get the effect down is what matters. And you also don't have to stay within a perfect line as well. Like you can even come into the middle part a bit and break up the line if it's just too separated. It doesn't matter. It's just kind of a guideline. All right, so now we're gonna be adding layers, and I'm just using the very tip of my brush, and I am going to be just blotting around different spots. But the key here is you need to make sure that you're leaving enough of that original lighter green color to kind of show. You don't want to completely cover it, otherwise you're going to lose your depth. So I'm blotting around the very tip of my brush. This can feel very awkward if you are a perfectionist. I'm very much a perfectionist. This was really hard for me, this technique. It takes lots of layers, and I promise once you get to like layer 2 or 3, it doesn't look as awkward. Okay, I'm doing the very same. Again, I'm trying my best to not completely cover the first original color that I have down. This is just to kind of mimic a forest in the background. And no surprise, we're going down to the lake and doing the reflection as well. And in order to layer, I need to dry this for the wet and dry technique, so I'm gonna hit up my dryer. I just wanna add just a spruce of color in mine, so I'm just adding a little bit of yellow to different spots. Not much, just a little. All right, so I'm gonna be mixing up a darker green color. So I have my sap green right here. I have my other green, darker green color. And I'm gonna mix in some cadmium red. I love this color green. I feel like it just gives it a very earthy, natural tone to it. It's kind of my go-to mixing color. I also really love indigo. I think it's a really good shadow color. And let's start again. So the key as well, as we keep layering the same thing, you wanna make sure that you're still leaving space for your first and second layer to shine through. And again, you can see here, I'm trying to cover the ink marks that I have been using for my sketch. So I'm making sure I'm touching through those so you can't really see it. And I'm going to do the same for the bottom. And I'm going to probably, yeah, I'm definitely going to do less detail for the reflection. It's not supposed to be a focal point. I'm going to dry this. So while that was drying, I just mixed up a little bit of brown and indigo again, just to do another layer, and I'm going to focus more towards the bottom, and I'm going to be doing loose shadowing towards the bottom, bringing it up ever so slightly. Okay, so I just mixed in a little bit of black, and I'm gonna go in as well with this color and kind of make some shadows at different points. And in the lake, towards the line. feel pretty good with this. And I'm gonna dry it. Actually, I'm gonna leave it. And I'm gonna mix up my first color, so I actually have to make a little bit of space in my palette. So I'm gonna mix up a gray color. And to make gray, I just added black and put a ton of water on it. And I'm gonna apply my first color. And you're gonna see here, as I'm going around, I'm gonna be leaving what we call white space, which is the paper. We're leaving the paper because I want there to be a natural highlight on the stone. Unlike acrylic, where you can just apply white on top, typically with watercolor, we try not to use white because we find it dulls out our colors. So I'm gonna let my paper be my white. I'm gonna let this dry because I don't want it to kind of bleed and blend. I want there to be a little bit of a contrast between each set. So I'm gonna kind of jump to different spots. So I'll go down here now and I'll basically mimic the same thing I just did up top, trying to cover it with a wash of my gray color. I have got no particular technique to this, just using the very tip of my brush and ensuring that I'm leaving a little bit of my highlight, which would be the white space. For my rock, I'll do my middle part right here, just like that, leaving a bit of white space. I can come down and do a leg. Now this is all personal preference as well, if you want to have a lot of white space or if you want to cover it. It's totally up to you and what you fancy. And what you can also do as well, you can also let there be white space, but then with your next layer, paint over top of it with whatever color you're using, and then it's automatically going to be a shade lighter than what you're putting down. If you don't want it to be white, I just want there to be a little bit of a contrast between my colors, which is why I am doing it this way. Okay, so this is probably somewhat dry, so I'm going to work on this one. So this piece is all about the loose watercolors. It's not supposed to look absolutely perfect. Just have fun with it. And then after each layer, you'll start to see that it kind of comes together, but it definitely takes some layering to get there. Okay, this bottom part's dry, and I am going to repeat what I just did for this bottom block part. And because this is rock, it is definitely not perfect. So I'm not really caring about any particular technique or what my brush is doing. Paying attention to some white space. And I have done my first layer for most of it. I just want to fill in these parts right here. So this part is automatically going to be darker. I'm going to leave a bit of white space around some parts, and then I'll paint over it with another layer when it's dry, and I'll have a nice effect there. Ooh, still a bit wet. I'm going to come in here. So this part right here, I want it to be darker. You'll see a little circle with your sketch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 parts that I want to be darker rock. Okay, cool. So again, what we just did with the mountain is what I'm going to do right here. Just lots of layers. So I'm going to dry this because otherwise with the wet on wet it'll just bleed. So I want this to definitely be dry. So I'm going to hit my dryer up. All right, so repeating what we just did, keeping in mind that we want to leave the original color to shine through as well. Otherwise you're going to leave all your depth. You're going to move around with your darker shade. You can cover all, you can, and I'm going to show you, see how right now I've just used that gray wash to just cover this white part, but it's already lighter than the color that I just put on top. That's another way that you can layer, doing it that way. I'm going to come down here now. And even when it is wet, you can go in and you can move around different spots as well. That's fine as well. And let there be like a natural bleed. But even if I did this, I would definitely still go in with some different layers. And I'm using the very tip of my brush. I'm actually angling it as well. I'm at like a 45-degree angle. And you'll see here my bristles are separating a little bit. This actually means that I don't have enough water on my brush, but I'm not going to be worried about that too much because I find that it just also gives it a very nice effect. If I'm painting a pretty dress or skin tones or stuff like that, I'm definitely not going to want there to be bristles separating. But because rocks are already naturally textured and I want there to be, I guess, a texture feel to this, I'm not minding at all that there's bristles separating. Okay, I am going to add a bit more darkness to these 6 pieces that we talked about. I'm going to meet this in the middle right here with that black. And you also don't have to do gray. You can choose any type of rock color that you like a red rock or brownish color. And I'm going to hit different points with the black to give it just a little bit more texture. can already see here my rock is kind of taking on a nice life to it. Starting to look like rock. Lots of the layers going down. And obviously with every layer that you put down, it's going to get darker as well. So keep that in mind as well. Oh, that's very dark. I'm going to break this up with just water. And I'm going to do, like, sometimes rocks have, you know, little vein-like appearances on the rock. So I'm going to go in and kind of mimic that. I also feel like this piece is getting very gray. So I want to introduce, I don't know, a few more colors into this to kind of break it up a little bit. I'm gonna dry this really fast. I'm gonna go in with the black. Okay, so because this black is very black, I now feel like there's just too much of a contrast. So I want to obviously darken up this rock a bit. And I can do that by introducing that black color. I'm actually just gonna scoop it right here to kind of break it up a bit into this part. It's blotting around, adding it in. See how I'm starting to put my veins, my rock veins down? Still using the very tip of my brush, kind of angling it a little bit at 45 degrees. I'm gonna go in here and emphasize different parts of the rock. Kind of start making little rock features. Okay, and then right here, I want to try and separate these rocks so they don't look like they're attached together. So I'm going to put a shadow underneath where this top part would be, and even this part as well. So wherever I see that there's a shadow, I'm going in and I'm kind of putting a darker line like right above it. So right here, I put a darker line above, right here. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with the rock. I just want to change up some of this part. So I'm going to introduce a little bit of brown into the gray color that I had mixed. And I want to introduce it just a little bit to just different points, just to break up the gray a bit. There's a lot of gray going on here. Okay, I'm going to dry this. I'm going to add more of that brown right underneath, scooping up the edge to blend it out, touching different points. I'd even bring in this brown just a bit, like a wash of it to different points in here again, just to kind of break up this gray part that we have. Just a lot of gray going on. Right here, I'm just gonna do some lines at the bottom as well. And because this is super close up, I want there to be a lot more detail with this rock. Adding in some brown at different points where the cracks are. So I'm gonna go in with my blue, and I just want to add just a little bit more detail. Now that it's dry, I can go in. I'm still using a wash of the color, but just to make it just appear that there's just a little bit of some waves. I just kind of felt like it was a bit flat right here, so I'm just gonna add, making sure that my blue that's right here is a little bit darker. And then you can slowly get into your yellow again. It's looking green. And again, the more And the distance you go, the less details you need to have. But I think just adding a second layer here will kind of make it look nice. And if you ever find you're getting like really harsh lines, you can always just use water on your brush to just blend them out. And I want the sky to just be a little bit more darker right here. See how I'm just adding a wash of the blue, bringing it down just a bit. I don't want too much, but just to kind of brighten up different areas with just a wash. And to just fix this little area right here. Okay, so for the cloud, it's kind of a mix between like a purple, bluey, browny color. So that's exactly what I'm gonna mix. The sky blue color with a little bit of purple with a little bit of brown. And I'm gonna start doing my clouds. And that's just kind of using the same technique I have already been doing. It's just using the very tip of my brush, using a wash of the color. And if it's too dark at points and you want to just blend it out, you can use just water as well. Add the color as well on this end. And I'm going to dry this and do a second layer. Just kind of touching underneath the cloud would be, just to give it a little bit of a pop and some definition. Okay. I'm now just kind of looking around, seeing if there's anything really that I can add. I am pretty happy with this.